To get elected, you need to tell them that in the States, this is a classic example of debt that has consistently worked in this democracy. One comes out and says, suckers, we'll raise your salary. And the suckers say, let's elect this one. 4 years pass, and another one needs to get elected. He says, suckers, sheep, I will increase your pension. The sheep also go to the chickens. No one wants to go to the chickens, so something needs to attract attention. That means with promises. And now in the States, thanks to this system, which is false, its flaws have been revealed. What are its flaws? These promises to the people have only led to more and more unemployment there. Those who left our country for the United States and live there on unemployment benefits are living better than if they were working. Now the question is, do we need non-working slaves? We do not. In addition, 5% of the Earth's population lives in the States, and these 5% consume almost 50% of the energy resources produced by all of humanity. If the rest live in the American way, the Earth will be depleted in just a few years. We are the mafia that rules this. Do we need this? We do not need it. Therefore, since we have shaped this model, I created you, and I will destroy you. Classic. Ulba, turn to your son. Your Poles helped you. Therefore, the states are now increasingly subject to destruction. But the management of these processes was done by a two-party system, one or the other. And what are they trying to do in our country? The hands of these same mindless rulers of ours. And the same speech is about the two-party system. And now they are trying to create a two-party system from united Russia. Kremlin's political technologists are smart. They do not understand that they are fulfilling the task of the global backstage. To rule the country, you need to swing this lever back and forth. Name, I say again, does not matter at all. Who is the representative of the interests of the raw materials sector in our country? The ruling party. Who represents the processing sector? Gennady Andreevich Zyuganov with the communists. In that location, the senior managers, often referred to as the red directors, are overseeing the operations at the factory. This factory is known for its production of a wide range of devices, including advanced rockets. These directors are currently focused on shaping and improving the processing sector, which is a critical component of the factory's overall production line. And the name does not matter at all. This explains the long existence of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. There are no ideals or care for people there. There are party nomenclature members who understand nothing about global politics. Well, for the sheep to approach the ballot boxes, there must be a scarecrow. What kind of scarecrow? After all, no one wants to pay attention to this nonsense. People want to go to their summer houses. That's why something like Rosa Perot uses fascism or something else as a scarecrow, or a bait and switch. Our scarecrow is Zhirinovsky, who draws attention. Why is he allowed? After all, normal, educated people understand that he is just a clown. There is no party there, no logic, nothing. The artist is very good, educated, and knowledgeable. He speaks beautifully, can captivate, scare, or amuse with a smart appearance to draw attention to these political procedures. Here you have this pendulum system, which is now being attempted to be shaped. It doesn't work. Why? According to the law of time, why doesn't it work? What is the United Russia Party? This is head and shoulders, 3 in 1. That is how Russia was divided among clans. One clan is the Yeltsin family, another clan is a regional clan, and the third clan is the Lushkov family. Each clan has its own interests. And while the division of these clans was happening, there were many orders to plunder. But the process of concentration and management of productive forces is objective. And no matter how light the rope is, the end will come. Therefore, everything that could be plundered has been plundered. And the borders of plunder have intersected. And then it is called competition. Therefore, the hand of Moscow, the hand of Lushkov extends to the regions and subdues all regional clans. Regional clans, represented by local entrepreneurs, whine and howl, not understanding anything. What is happening there? What is the reason? Why are we being subdued? Why do the Muscovites come? Can't the situation be stabilized? Therefore, they are trying to stabilize through the authorities so that this democracy can take root. It will not take root. Why? According to the law of time, because if there, in the West, capitalism developed over centuries and people gradually got used to becoming wealthier, here it was, a sudden boom, and they became billionaires all at once. Morgan accumulated his fortunes over centuries, while here, in 1 hour, these Abramoviches, Khodorkovskys, and other boys to whom money was entrusted are not the ones. This was entrusted to them by the nomenclature, but they also did not understand what they were getting into. This is the whole situation. No one was planning to establish any democracy or capitalism with us. Why? Because the American way of life, as I told you, is not needed. It has outlived itself. And all these democratizing procedures are, in fact, utter nonsense that allows people to increase their wealth in various ways. But there is nothing left to increase. Therefore, the global mafia decided to switch to a strict fascist regime. Therefore, right now, during this period, we are being vaccinated. For what purpose? So that the people come to hate all of this, which is happening by the hands of the people. These Berezovskys, Abramovichs, Lushkovs, all of them, meaning Yeltsins and others, meaning to raise them on pitchforks and establish a strict fascist regime, so that the people joyfully accept this matter. That's the situation. This needs to be understood. This is global politics. Yet neither side understands. They think that here it is the most. They are cool, very smart, understand everything. No. This two-party system, that's what I wanted to tell you about. But in this sense, there is no bad without good. And what does the lower picture illustrate? How Russia is being rebuilt away from this global mafia. They themselves do not understand this either. Why? Because they lost control. They have stopped being the predictor. We should rename the global predictor to someone else. To a global observer, perhaps. Or some kind of worldwide degenerator, certainly. Indeed, look at what happened. They ruled our country through a false ideology, Marxism. There was the Supreme Soviet and a government that implemented the plans of the global backstage in 1991. This scheme was presented at parliamentary hearings when multipartyism was introduced. The Communist Party's power was renounced. And it was stated that no ideology could be dominant. That is, in Russia, there is no ideological power at all. Pluralism. Now they are trying to shape it. Yeltsin set the task of developing a state ideology. You remember. He was supposed to develop it, and he was assigned to do so. We immediately handed our concept to Sattarov, and Sattarov quickly wrote a resignation letter and left the Kremlin. I'm telling you this seriously. All of this can be confirmed with data, chronological records, and so on. This is an outright agent of the global backstage. Next, the shooting of the Supreme Soviet. The same goes for that parliament. It was also liquidated, and this puppet body was created. They are now trying to make it a two-party system. What are the parties of power? They merged three into one. One clan of Yeltsin. The party United Russia, led by Shoigu. The homeland is Lushkov. And all of Russia is Shaimiev. Their interests are different there. Therefore, now Gryzlov is trying to turn this mafia into a voting machine, as Putin set the task. And these deputies understood why they went there, to implement plans and lobby. But they are told, no guys, we sent you here to raise your hands. And they got confused, read the newspapers. It says that everything is falling apart. There is no unity. They are trying to create their own factions, while the Kremlin is trying to create a two-party system. That's what I told you before. But we say nothing will come of it, and we explain why. And in fact, what is happening now is the destruction of the government. Look at Fradkov's government. Well, what is it? The fable by Krylov. You friends, no matter how you sit, you are all unfit musicians. Why? Because according to the complete management function, changing the structure is just 1/7 of the complete management function. And for all these years, they have been effectively working to destroy governments without even realizing it. They rename ministries, give some offices, agencies, commissions. Now there is information at a minimum, information at a maximum. Now the government is completely incapacitated. There is no governance at all. So it turns out, you see, that Russia is transitioning to a self-governance mode. The people look at all this mess in the Kremlin, hear from Tiumen, and say, go to hell, all of you. We will live on our own. That's it. That is a loss of control. That is a transition to the concept of self-governance. And now the people just need to be told how to implement the self-governance regime, what the ideals and principles are, and that's it. The end of this global mafia. How to do this? They're talking about it. Let's summarize the interim results. They launch false targets on purpose, images. They launch false targets on purpose. And this is done like this. Along with the missile, with the necessary target, it is launched. Along with the missile, the necessary target is launched. Along with the missile, metal spheres are launched. And the missile, the locator, when it scans the sky, perceives these balloons as if they are metal blanks flying with a nuclear charge. And therefore the anti-missile, instead of hitting the necessary missile, diverts to these so-called false targets. Here in the picture, this is depicted. The missile has launched, it needs to hit the necessary target, but it has diverted, heading towards a false target, bang, crash, fizz, and it hit not what it was supposed to. So here, if we transfer this to the situation with our planet, here flies our Earth, which means there are people on it, a super system. Where are we all supposed to fly, like this missile? We should fly, well, according to God's design, to the necessary target. The goal set by the hierarchically higher authority in relation to us. What did the global mafia do? They set a false goal. Here is a soap bubble. What is needed, well, means God endured and commanded us something else. Here are all those false ideals. Divide, incite, dominate. Checheve, man, friend, comrade, and brother. That is, the wolf is meant. And this principle of divide and conquer, they implemented through the concentration of control over the productive forces of humanity. And they led humanity to a dead end. A complete global systemic crisis in everything. And what is the speech about? Here is the period of biblical civilization. That is, the entire history of humanity is a diversion of humanity from the necessary path of development, mastering the genetically determined potential of both each individual and the super system as a whole. But since the vector of the goal is incorrect, false, it does not correspond to the encompassing management. Remember everything we learned in these lectures. Thus, we have come to a dead end. So, what is the way out? We need to align the vector of our development goals with the vector of the goals of the hierarchically higher encompassing management. Well, it is graphically depicted here that humanity needs to be brought onto the right course towards theocracy. That is, to live as God intended in relation to humanity, setting the tasks. That's all, generally speaking. These processes of concentrating control over productive forces are being implemented. They are being implemented in two ways. The first way is what the global mafia essentially does. In essence, it is a method of destruction. And the second way is the method of proactive integration. What is the method of destruction? How do they subjugate countries and peoples? We have discussed 6 priorities of generalized means. They destroy infrastructure, pit different groups of people against one another, and communities, destroy ideologies, and distort history, and more. They destroy the education system, and under their destructive influence, they subjugate. They subjugate that territory, that part of the super system, impose their goals on it, and it works for them. From this perspective, what is being done in relation to the USSR? What is being done is precisely the method of destruction is applied to subjugate our USSR, Russia, while Stalin opposed this system. By the way, this is why we can now suggest returning to Stalin. Because why Stalin did not leave heirs, and why there was no stability, and to talk about these two concepts. We have already talked with you in one of the lectures. I remember I mentioned that Stalin's concept was in images. That is, he envisioned how to do it, but he did not have a terminological apparatus. And he was forced to use the terminological apparatus of Marxism. But this terminological apparatus does not correspond to what actually exists. And in general, if we extend this thesis, then two concepts of life organization have always been present in people's lives throughout human history. That is, we should not think that here in Russia they gathered and developed a concept. No, no, no. This concept has always existed, and there have always been two. The first one, the satanic one, which we talked about, biblical, and it was terminologically shaped through the Bible. And the core there, I quoted to you, is the dominance of some people over others. They cloaked the concept where some dominate over others in acceptable forms and implemented it. And our benevolent and divine concept has always existed as well. Why? Because people, normal people, have always strived to live in harmony with each other, with God, with nature, and with their neighbors. The common people, not the elite. Therefore, how was this concept expressed in the common people? In fairy tales, in legends, in epics, in songs, in proverbs, in sayings. That is, in essence, it was in the culture of the people. It was not expressed in rigid and strict lexical forms. It was scattered like beads in the folk epic. Always in fairy tales, remember, there is a struggle against evil, meaning justice, injustice, what our Russian songs are like. Yes, it's the same in other nations as well. Various anecdotes, proverbs, and sayings. And what is the merit of the author of Concessions of Public Safety and Dead Water? That everything expressed in the folk epic is certainly indeed presented with a modern conceptual terminological apparatus. First of all, a fairly general theory of management. There are no discoveries here, as you can see. And when we encounter people, they say, yes, we thought so too. And why did they think so too? Because they lived and live by this concept. And once again I say, these two concepts have always existed. That is, one should not think that some invention has occurred now, what has happened now. The formalization of this concept, if the ancient Egyptian priesthood formalized it 3,500 years ago, then now in Russia, for the first time in human history, a moral concept of human life has been formalized. In the modern conceptual apparatus of language, that's all linguistically. So why did I stop on this? The triumph of that concept is destructive, and its main principle is divide, incite, rule. How to subjugate. Whispered one thing to one, another to another, was the quarrel, and if there is no quarrel, this one rejoices, war, peace, poor, rich. Principle of divide and rule is everywhere, but now it has started to work against the very destroyers. That is, while globalization was ongoing, it was effective. That is, while there was someone to rob. They robbed neighboring summer cottages. But when all the plots became theirs, who to rob? Themselves. But what principle remains? The principle of robbery. They are not succeeding at all. Therefore, the principle of destruction they used has stopped working and has started to work against them. And in relation to Directive 20.1 from August 18, 1948, and in relation to the Harvard Project for the dismemberment of the USSR to seize its resources, the same destructive principle is at work. How did they prepare it, and how are they implementing it? The education system is being destroyed through reforms. Who is doing this? It is our own people. That is, they were convinced that reform is necessary, and now they are engaged in this nonsense. The same is happening with the healthcare system. The national economy of the country is being destroyed through the credit and financial system. The village is being destroyed, and they would be glad to stop this process. But as one great person said, the process has already begun. Democrats are told that they do not want everything to be destroyed to such an extent, and they say that they indeed cannot do anything more. This is the roughly approximate situation. The principle of destruction, concentration of control. What is the principle of our concept? The principle of proactive integration, subordination to one's own interests without destruction. So how will the implementation of our concept go? Let's take a look. This is called, at first there was the principle of seizing control. How did they act with their destructive impact? There is an object of control. There is a subject of control. This is the people, the state, and these are the governing bodies of the country. How did they act? They told the governing bodies, to Gorbachev, that you will enter history. Ministers were told, why are you being so secretive? Legalize all your wealth to the merchants who were hiding it in stockings and so on. The people were told things like BBC, Voice of America, and other things. What? You don't have pants with labels? You lack chewing gum. You will live like in the West. That is, the people fell for all these enticements. So how did they influence us informationally? And what did they lead to? The whole country began to work for them, but their goals were destructive. That is, the principle of informational influence had a destructive nature. And what do we say? All right, guys, if you could do this to the country, then why can't we, possessing such information, possessing methods and ways, realize our moral ideals? And what are we doing? We say, we influence people, telling them how things should be, revealing how we are being conned. We influence the authorities, starting from the president, deputies of the State Duma at all levels. We reveal that they are merely a tool. We comment on state documents, criticize them, we assess the situation. Here is the feedback. You see, it is coming, which means we reveal where the country is heading. And with our informational influence, we propose the most important thing to understand is that we orient the elements of the super system towards our vector of goals. You remember, management is what? The vector of goals, the vector of the current state, the vector of error. If in the vector of goals you have one situation at the top, like they do, or rather one goal, and we propose different goals, that's all. That is, if their principle is embedded in the vector of goals, it's every man for himself. You have to spin around. You understand. We dispel common misconceptions and firmly state that the practice of lending money should always be conducted on a completely interest-free basis, ensuring fairness and equity for all parties involved. We propose our vector of goals as we see fit. And people, even those journalists who do not understand what is happening, begin to work towards our vector of goals. How? Imagine you are a journalist, and you are saying or writing something, and suddenly a journalist appears who writes something cooler than you, introduces some new terms, and your publications are no longer interesting. You think, what should I do? I need to shine with something. And then such information comes in and he says, I will write about this. And he writes, that is, he spreads our information. And so what? Since he spreads our information, he works for us towards the goals we have set. The same applies to all parties. Here are the parties. They defend certain ideals, but they see that the people do not understand them. They think about what to do, what to come up with, because they have nothing to say to the people. All parties, nothing to say to the people. And now look at our program and read what we offer. Therefore, whether they want to or not, they begin to say what we propose. And many are surprised. They say, Mr. Pavlovich, why is it that what you say is being said on television? And we say, well, let them say it for God's sake. This is what the system of control interception consists of. In this sense, we say to our activists and supporters of the concept of public safety, what is the thesis? One should not wait for anything. Our people think that to change the situation, one must take something and run somewhere, hit someone on the head, or shoot at someone to change something. No need for that. You can already work on our concept, on our moral concept, together. How? Well, here is the lower picture. For example, you are a teacher in a school, an ordinary teacher in a school. You teach certain subjects, you explain, have become familiar with this concept, and you start to tell this to the children in school. That's it. And we already have such examples. There are many examples across the country. What are you doing? You take control. That is, by telling children about the Trinity, about the priorities of generalized means, about alcohol, not because it shouldn't be consumed, but because you can get drunk and choke on your own vomit, but because it is a tool of control. Tell the girls how multiple sexual encounters before marriage indeed affect childbirth. Well, that is what we have. What are you doing? You take control with this satanic concept. They will no longer run around with beer cans when they understand the depth of it. And if this is done from childhood, who is stopping you? No one is stopping you. Moreover, you can tell this to your school principal, and we already have this everywhere. That is, the takeover is happening from the bottom up, and there is no need to wait for any instructions. For example, our party organization in Chelyabinsk, in the region, is headed by Anatoly Georgievich Shipitsin, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Professor. He is engaged in serious scientific activity. He is the head of the Department of Control Systems. He reads all of this to his students. We even have permission from the Ministry of Education that this can be offered as courses, authors' programs. Well, let's say you listen to all these previous lectures, introductions. What politics is there? They were about philosophy, about psychology. So, about management theory, about economics. Who prevents you from telling all this? Even as, so to speak, there is such an opinion, variable education, that is, everything is allowed. You can also present this, that is, you are already intercepting. Or you, for example, I talked about the school. Take the workshop. We have these examples.